Good afternoon, everyone, or whatever time of day it is you're watching us. I am Jonathan Warner. I'm one of the 5 MLTI 2.0 ambassadors. I live down in Portland, and I work for the Cape Elizabeth School District when I am not employed by the Department of Education.
And I'm Kate Meyer, and I am also one of the MLTI ambassadors. I'm located in Ellsworth, Maine, and when I'm not working for the Department of Education, I'm an English teacher and a design thinking teacher at Mount Desert Island High School in Bar Harbor.
Awesome. So Kate and I have been doing quite a bit of work together and felt like this topic worked really nicely as a paired series of conversations about news and media literacy. So I was an English language arts high school teacher before I became a technology integrator, and then a pseudo librarian, where I spent a great deal of time with my library students because we merged our library and tech integration programs, and got really passionate about this subject because I felt like the questions around it were exploding, and we really didn't have a lot of information about direct instructing. And the more I explored, the more I realized resources were out there, but I felt quite on my own as we first started out. So what we have decided we'll do is a 4-part series where we will pair sessions on Wednesdays and Thursdays. So today's session, we're going to look at finding and using credible news sources, and specifically thinking about how we provide students with the tools that they need to evaluate what they're finding, and making sure that they have rubrics and the capacities or the skill set that we've given attention to as a separate skill from research, looking at how those resources may or may not indicate or provide information about their accuracy, their bias. And we're marrying this to the Common Sense education curriculum. Common Sense has been a terrific partner for us. And in tomorrow's session, Kate will take us through the lesson that they have for 6th graders focused on this, although there's no real need to stay in that area. As she'll discuss, Kate's a high school teacher, and many of the concepts and sort of the focus of those lessons will work in multiple grades. But Common Sense has assigned that lesson to 6th grade, so we'll use that as our jumping off point. And then as we move forward, next week we'll look at the 4 factors of fair use. After that, reacting to breaking news, and finally responding to hoaxes and fakes. So we want to provide you in this first session today with the what and why of teaching these questions around credible news sources, and then the to whom and how in tomorrow's session. And I'll start off by looking at resources from the perspective of rethinking the term fake news. So one of the observations that has been made is that the politicization of the term fake news and how it first really emerged as in popularity was in a political culture. And the News Literacy Project, which I'll talk more about, has suggested that we move away from that term towards information disorder. But what they mean is not an illness like a disorder, but the lack of order in information. And their argument is that we're getting away from some of the emotionally charged aspect of the term fake news and can really engage more substantively in the conversations about it. So they also observe that there's a kind of alternative series of terms that can be really helpful for kids and for yourself as a teacher to use as a replacement for fake news as a concept. So they suggest thinking about it as misinformation, malinformation, and disinformation. So misinformation is simply innocuous in the sense that it may have negative impact, but it isn't put out there with the intent of doing anything bad. It's just something that's gotten out that is believed or thought to be true, but isn't going to detrimentally impact the listeners or the hearers or the readers unless it's, maybe embarrassing, something along those lines, versus malinformation, which is correct, but spread with the intent to cause harm. So it might be misrepresentation of the statistics in a situation where you're saying that 10% of the people responded, but it was 1 out of 10 people, and you're speaking as if it's representing the entire population. So perhaps you make an inquiry in a heavily Republican area about something, you get the response, and the response is accurate, and you might state that of those surveyed, 80% held this view, but you're not observing more broadly that those 80% were of a group that's already representing bias. So malinformation is, you can dial it, or you can sort of dig down to find that it is truthful per se, but the way in which it's shared is maybe through mislabeling, somehow being used to manipulate it for the purpose of creating harm. And then the one that I think we most often associate with the term fake news, false information that is spread with malicious intent. So this is intentionally biased to create greater negative responses, to bring about sort of a passionate emotional response to things. And we'll talk in a minute about some of the campaigns that are being mounted to help students combat that sort of sensibility. But there is a real intention to trigger the listeners and trigger the readers and the viewers. And in that, to whip them up into a kind of mindlessness. And that impact is, as we've seen, incredibly divisive. So I really like this splitting out of the terms, because it gives a better sensibility for kids to understand how it's the disinformation that's the most dangerous of these, and that there may be a number of other problematic things happening along the continuum, but there are particular areas where greater caution is warranted. As a part of teaching those concepts, each year the News Literacy Center, or project, offers resources around the National News Literacy Week. This year's campaign was around the flood of misinformation, but they have really terrific short videos and visuals that you can use with students, and they keep them up for the whole year. So even, obviously it's May, we've missed this year's celebration or recognition, but those resources will stay in place until next January. And then there's a new theme, I guess I would say, to the campaign. One other aspect of News Literacy Project that I really am impressed by is the degree to which they see it as a democratic undertaking, a democracy improving undertaking, really getting the professional support needed for teachers to be able to teach as a civic skill, and as a way to evaluate information that's coming to you when you're going to vote, about how to vote, about how to get involved in your community, that especially disenfranchised populations have even greater, I guess, susceptibility to the problems that arise when misinformation, disinformation, malinformation are put out. And if you take it on yourself as a responsibility as a teacher, their argument is you're really pushing a democracy-driven civic agenda. And I like that spin to it, because it really gives importance to making sure this is not something that just happens in your social studies class, or something that gets funneled to the librarian to teach. I think they offer so many different ways to approach it, and then this sort of underlying responsibility as a teacher to bring this skill to students. It also fits nicely with Common Sense Media's observation that so frequently we leave kids to navigate this on their own, and we assume that they can do it. But this, perhaps more so than many of the other digital citizenship lessons and skill sets is one where we see the direct impact so visibly in work that's turned in classroom assignments, that my hope at least is that we can use this as a way to get schools and districts talking more about digital citizenship issues, because it's already been acknowledged as such an important area. The Literacy Project has a really terrific YouTube channel that's linked there, and specifically student stories, which I really have found a powerful tool to have kids hear kids and engage in the conversations that emerge from those. They also have wonderful interviews with teachers and some really excellent professional development webinars. So this first one, the Teaching News Literacy, Where Do I Start, is one of about a dozen hour-long sessions to really help you ramp up your skills in this area. And that's the first in the series. They have also developed a tool called Shakology, and it is a totally free platform. You just need to register for it. That is a combination of direct instruction asynchronously, so you can assign lessons in it, but it also offers a series of tools and lenses to use for students as they make evaluations of sources that they're finding. So this checklist on the right-hand side is one aspect of it, and it'll pop up next to what the student is evaluating, and then they rate it in each of these areas. And as they do, it provides a score, and then it begins with a series of pre-selected sources, and it shows you how you as the student did versus the team of experts that did that same analysis, and shows you where you might have discrepancies between your evaluation in these areas. But it does it in a really sort of, it does it with some really outrageous pieces at first, and then they become more and more credible in their presentation. And I think really nicely tracks the student's learning curve and readiness to kind of engage with the more nuanced things. Because of course the huge problem arises when it's difficult to tell the difference. It's often the really egregious situations that make you realize you need to be having the conversations, but it's not nearly as clear when it becomes something that a student might cite as a resource, or something that they've relied upon to make an argument, and suddenly you have to break the bad news that we need to kind of back up to that step. So this tool that they've offered, you log in and then you can use it in conjunction with your research. You can also use it to get confirmation of various sources and suggestions for resources that might help you with whatever you're researching. So once you as a teacher have set up your classes, it can operate independently for the students. And it's the asynchronous piece that I really liked, because it offers them the skill set development, just like a flipped classroom, outside of your class. And then they come in and they can have the more substantive conversations with you, helping negotiate those complexities. I just put in here the trailer for Shakology because I think it also does a really great job of offering students a quick glimpse of what we're talking about. And I think it can feel a little hypothetical, or like, yeah, this is really important, guys, believe me. And I thought at least that this short video does a good job of providing visuals and summarizing why people may get really passionate about these questions and then become almost blinded, I guess I would say, to the fact that there's underlying concerns or underlying lack of truth that is creating people's passionate feeling. So I'll just take a minute to share that with you.
Students are bombarded with information.
Tracy Potts, and I'm a reporter.
Hi, I'm Enrique Acevedo from Noticias Univision.
I'm Kimberly Strassel. I write opinion pieces.
I'm Wesley Lowry, a national correspondent for the Washington Post.
Students can be active, critical thinkers and demand the truth.
They need to learn how to listen to credible sources and make their own decisions. What's the big deal about people being misinformed? It's time to check it out.
So from my perspective, at least, giving them an opportunity then to tell me what they saw. I think there are other ways to do that, certainly, but because as you can see, it's created as a sales pitch for that particular product. But if you were to freeze frame on some of those images, I felt like it gave a really good series of examples of the kinds of things that students might encounter, headlines, all the different apps, the series of images at the beginning with the kinds of things that they might be encountering in social media. So those to me felt like a good entry point, whether for you or for your students. And as I said, it is a free tool that I have found to be really not just engaging for them, but it really is skill developing. And I was really impressed with how they did that.
Can I jump in for a second, Jonathan?
Yeah,
Can I jump in for a second?
Yes.
One thing that I really like about that particular platform and the video that you showed, but then some of the resources that they offer is that it's really authentic. And it doesn't talk down to the students, which I think, especially around digital citizenship, is really important because the students do feel like they are the experts because they are on the social media, they're using the technology. And so I think sometimes it's kind of tricky for educators to be like, we have, information to offer you to help you make better choices around how you're using your technology. And so I think whatever resource you end up, using as an educator with your students, I think looking for sources that are really authentic and don't speak down to your students, I think that's really important. And so I think Shakology, for me at least, kind of checks all the boxes that I look for when I'm looking for resources that are that way.
Awesome. And we've talked too about, or Kate and I have talked about how there's a kind of a righteous indignation that kids have. And if you can tap into that and get them thinking about how they're being manipulated, I'm a little worried that it's our own form of malinformation. But anyway, we're both really astounded by how kids just really want to undertake this on their own. And the authenticity that Kate mentions, I think, only amplifies that sensibility, because if you're showing them, not hypothetical, but Ukraine is an amazing example of this at the moment, where you can begin to look at resources across the spectrum, reporting on Ukraine, and then having really substantive conversations where one of the articles I was reading as I got ready for today was looking at how TikTok is spreading misinformation and incredibly accurate information about what's happening, and how it is in that way platform neutral. So to say to a kid, don't believe TikTok, is actually its own misinformation, right? Carefully evaluate what information you're getting from whatever platform it is. We've also found that getting kids talking about how to respond to it, what to do about it, is really powerful. And there are so many embedded pieces. Shakology has them as well, but as does Common Sense Media and the National Literacy, the News Literacy Project, where there's action items for kids, and that authenticity can also be really powerful. A different approach to this that I also think can be really useful is more along the line of a campaign. So I work with the civil rights team at the middle school in Cape, and we have a number of activities over the course of the year where we work to get information out about Black History Month, or we do a whole series of events around the Day of Welcome, creating a community that's welcoming. But we found too that there's some really important and good work to do around social media in particular. And as we were digging into that for last year's campaign, this, which came from a group called Share Verified, and it's a partnership with, to my surprise, the United Nations, looking at how misinformation and the immediacy with which we share things can be incredibly detrimental. So this tagline of "take care before you share," that there's a way in which, again, we kind of activate the students' engagement in this. If we can give them tools and give them something constructive and substantive to bite into, it can be really empowering and get them away from the idea that this is just like, hey guys, it's really important that we talk about misinformation, to seeing why that's in their own lives having an impact. So the campaign has these 5 facets, I guess I'd say, under the hashtag Pledge to Pause. So they ask students to consider who made what you're about to share, what's the source, where did it come from, why are you sharing it, and when was it published? And in asking those questions, using it as a lens to determine before they've put it out, and oftentimes we talk about a student's digital footprint. Increasingly, we're talking about it as their digital tattoo, things that get out there that they cannot erase or get away from. This campaign, and the image on the left there is a video link to a Vimeo, just a short trailer related to the campaign. But the resources on their website are wonderfully visual. There's GIFs and images, posters, things you can embed in websites that have really given students the sense that there's something specific to do, that in pausing, there is value, and there's a way to participate in reducing the share of misinformation. Another sort of I guess, post on the classroom wall approach that has gained a lot of traction among librarians and is one embraced by the News Literacy Project as well, is Sift. So asking students as they look at any resource, but this one is particularly valuable in things that might be used for research or as a basis for exploration of factual information, to stop, investigate the source, find better coverage, and then trace the claims, quotes, and media to its original context. And getting students just to think about the fact that a single source always will have bias, and the more sources you pull in, the more likely you are to get something closer to the truth. This website, Hapgood, I believe. Yep, sorry, my little bar was blocking it. Hapgood has Sift related lessons connected to it, but simply just posting this as a framework. Hey, Joe, did you Sift before you included that in your paper? There's a default aspect to that can be really helpful to set as a norm in a classroom. So this isn't a particular approach so much as it is just a reminder that anything that's included, anything that's put in as a part of research really should be sifted before it's included. I came to be more familiar with some of these additional resources as I was looking at ways to support my students in my school library, but the AASL, which is the American Association of School Librarians, School Libraries, offers a whole series of resources under the tagline fake news. So having just said we shouldn't use fake news, for this purpose we should. So their publication is called Knowledge Quest, and then the tag is fake news. And you'll see dozens and dozens of more specific, whether it's training, there are webinars, there are, you can see 14 resources for citing sources. So there's any number of more granular resources available to you. But once you figure out how this concept is related to your curriculum, I have found that AASL almost always has another way in, another sort of place to explore, and some additional either individuals or resources to take a look at that will expand your own understanding and even offer in-class lessons, things that will be actionable for your students and really operate as a, I guess like a backup plan when you get to something where you feel stuck. That tag will be really helpful. And this is like the initial lesson from the News Literacy Project. This is AASL's introduction to how to teach these questions of reliability, and also an hour-long webinar, free and really thoughtful and engaging, directed more towards school librarians, but it was created for them. It's not in any way limited to them. So worth trying out if you find that the other one is not your cup of tea. So we're going to pause here for a second for today. And you'll notice a remarkable similarity as we remain clothed exactly as we are. We'll just pause the video and ask you to tune in again tomorrow for part 2, where Kate will take us through the Common Sense Education curriculum that you see here, how they've set it up, and how they have given you the approach that works for middle school students. But then she'll also take us through some of the other methodologies she's used, and in particular a tool that really can be invaluable as you try to teach this skill, and hopefully one that's applicable to some other areas as well. So thanks for joining us, and we'll see you shortly or tomorrow.